Hi, and welcome to the Urban Tech VC, a podcast for urban leaders shaping the cities of tomorrow. If you love our show, do drop us a review, share it with your friends, and follow 2BX on LinkedIn or Instagram. Today, we're happy to welcome Martha. Martha is part of the founding team of the Young Leaders Academy, a value-driven education and consulting collective by and for the next generation of sustainable urban development. As well as all of this, she is also a political entrepreneur, sustainable mobility expert, singer, and speaker. If you're an urban tech founder about to raise a round, do reach out to us. We'd love to connect and see if we should play together. Are you tired of always hearing about Silicon Valley VCs and not knowing what the greats of European VC are thinking? Well, no more. Head on over to eu.vc, the go-to place for everything European VC. You'll find podcasts, events, and expert curated content from all over the EU VC scene. Well, what are you waiting for? Go to eu.vc.
Hey, Marta. Welcome to the Urban Tech VC. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome from my side as well. I'm looking really forward to this episode and to your story. And let's talk about urban mobility.
Right?
Yes. But first of all, let's experience more about who is Marta. And I have the tendency to stalk people a bit, to Google people. And when people start Googling you, they will come across descriptions like political entrepreneur, an important description, sustainable mobility consultant, and singer. You published a book this year. You are in a super interesting phase of life where you close a certain chapter and you open a new one. So to me, it sounds like you're super interested in so many things. But what is important for you, or what was very important on your journey, and what made you the person you are today?
Oh, wow, tough one to start with, but I'll try to answer it. Building my first company that you mentioned, particularly, and the mobility consultant, Simone, then writing a book about how the mobility of the future should be designed to make our cities more healthy and more livable. And now creating an international collective are, for me, like different seasons, I have to say, of a series that are connected by a common thread. I've always been interested in how do we transform as a society towards one that is more socially just, healthy, diverse, or sustainable. What kind of collective behaviors and routines do we have? And how do we get that changed? Because obviously we have to. And how do we create a positive or even fun transformation, even if it seems difficult or possible at first? So I always had this critical mind if there was something feeling so wrong, like our education system, because it started in school already. I was like, but we can actually do something about it, right? And that is the genuine energy I have as an entrepreneur. Now working in the field of sustainable urban mobility for 7 years, I still do feel this tremendous need to take responsibility in a transformation that is not negotiable anymore. Against all odds, as an entrepreneur, you experience a lot of struggles, which in my case appeared like it was the car industry, for instance. And if someone tells me today, I cannot do this or accomplish that, I'm like, even more than ever. But one more thought on education. I chose to study and work interdisciplinary to let others surprise me with their knowledge. And also, like in this discussion we will have right now, knowledge that I maybe wouldn't have chosen to learn something about. It really gives me life and to keep growing and always questioning my way of doing things and this positive doubt. And I need both theory and practice, and writing a book as an entrepreneur somehow merges both worlds. And also I'm excited about bringing people together with different cultural backgrounds and professional or personal backgrounds. And that led me, building a team the last 7 years, and also the next chapter, which is working on a transnational education consulting collective. So that's a little about me.
I love the picture of different seasons of a series, because it's like an open end.
Yes.
You told us a little bit beforehand from your background, right? Coming out of a family of musicians with a brother who is an actor. Can you tell us what drove you towards urban mobility? So what was kind of like the kicker? I mean, there are so many things from what you just told you that could have sparked your interest, but why was it mobility or urban mobility in particular?
When we talk about mobility, it is a complex question, like the mobility turnaround. What is it about, really? Because I believe the question is not how do we change a vehicle, like the car or any other vehicle, to get a version that would meet, for instance, the goals of the Green Deal. And what technology would make a car more sustainable. It is more about questions like how can we truly address the pressures of climate change, social justice, resource-saving real estate development, our collective health, and how do we include these topics like new work or gender diversity in designing the mobility of the future. Just a little example from Vienna. The city administration has a department called gender mainstreaming, and it collects data to form the basis for more traffic safety and security in public space for all genders. And as a political sign against discrimination, there's also a trans pride crosswalk in the city. So it's mobility, urban mobility or urban development of the future is quite complex because it is not limited to mobility. It's about a lot of political issues that we face as a society. And this is something that really was interesting for me to learn about, because the city is my space where I live, where I expect things to happen. I always chose the city because I want to be inspired, because there's art, there's concerts, there are people from different backgrounds. Like Berlin, it's like a melting pot and very international. And to get to know those other expertises or other knowledge, the city is perfect. Also in history, it was like, of course, causing a lot of problems like today, but also it was the hub for solutions to make life better. So for me, life somehow decided that I'm going to work in this field, because I was actually very interested in working in education and improve our education system or university systems, public education. But life led me to another branch or more maybe topic, and it really flourishes the longer I work in it, the more I know about how complex this topic really is, because it includes so many social cohesion or democratic values. And that really is super interesting for me to be part of this transformation.
Very interesting, because sometimes you have people that are inspired by this one moment, where it just clicks, and then people say, okay, we have to do something about it. But with you, it sounds quite different, right? So it's a little bit more like a journey, and the intrinsic motivation to do good or to do meaningful things for society. And I really respect that and consider that a wonderful drive. Let's jump into our first topic we briefly touched upon already. Yes. So you mentioned the transition to cleaner, greener and smarter mobility in cities, the necessity of it. We do not want to dive too deep into this topic, because I think we can all agree that there are a lot of things that needs to be changed, also in line with the objectives of the European Green Deal. You published a book about the necessary transformation and the things we need to do or keep in mind when it comes to this transition to a different mobility in urban areas, called Bewegt euch selber, or Move Yourselves. So you proclaim that mobility turnaround is not a technology turnaround, which is quite interesting, but a change in behavior. Although I personally would love to discuss the black and white here, right?
Of course, we're an Urban Tech VC. Probably we should.
Yeah, probably we should. But why do you think so? And can you give us a little bit of insight? What do you mean by behavioral change in that matter? And what do we need to change in our behavior to come or to achieve the objective also of the European Green Deal?
The really relevant questions are not how can we improve a technology to more sustainability. It's a part of the process, but it's like thinking from the past. And what we have to do is raise those questions like, where do we want to live, or how do we want to work, with whom, where, and when also. Very simple and basic questions, but essential to the change of behavior. And it makes like you suspect or expect that there's more than one actor in the urban context, right? So there's not only the municipality, but other actors to take responsibility in this transformation we face. It's also the private sector, it's the industry, companies and employers, but also the education sector, schools, universities that have their share in rush hour. So just imagine, under the city's mediation, companies might decide that their employees no longer all start working at the same time. Why can't kindergartens and schools start at staggered times? These questions have been raised for years right now, for instance, by the Association of German Transport Companies, and they're more relevant than ever. So in my book, that's what I mean with social innovation. We have to think intersectoral, work interdisciplinary and also intergenerational, because not only we have those different actors, but also different user profiles, so to say. Families with children have different needs than older people. Women, students, commuters, teenagers, or people with disabilities, they all have individual requirements for mobility. Like I mentioned the gender topic before. So flexibility and diversity in modes of transport is what the future of mobility must deliver. And sustainable mobility should always be available everywhere and easy to use at any time of the day. But maybe one point I have to make is mobility shouldn't be the protagonist in a city, like we did with the car over the last 100 years. So the visible part of a city should always be about the social aspect, focusing on the quality of life of the residents of the neighborhood, like playgrounds, sports fields, green spaces, cafes, or stores, whatever. But on a more visual level, it's like a mobility mycelium that interconnects and supplies our city with active modes of transport. But it is another approach to not put the focus on the visibility on mobility, but the social aspect. That's my point. We have to look at mobility holistically. So how can we literally change ingrained patterns of behavior to a higher modal split share of active mobility? And research shows that the first goal you strive for when working in mobility is avoided wherever you can. That means we need multifunctional places where people can find everything they need. Imagine mobility hubs, all within a short distance, that also contain a gym or a pharmacy, medical services, a local market, or for social activities like music and arts. So this is key, the short distances. They solve a lot of mobility issues in our cities.
100%. Like something that crosses my mind, a lot of mobility issues that we have, in my opinion, and you touched upon, for example, staggered school starting times and stuff like that, are due to external factors, right? And if we look at urban dwellers, in particular, we have a very diversified group, also when it comes into income and social levels. So something that always crosses my mind and get me sometimes really, really angry is the lack of accessibility for certain groups of people of our society to certain offers in the mobility space. What is your take particularly on the accessibility at the moment, which in my opinion is not there, right? So there has been, like, just to highlight one point, there has been a very interesting study when it came to public transport and the fact that we should make it costless for everyone, right? Because it's subsidized anyway. And there has been a very interesting study stating that in Berlin, this would have no effect on more people moving around. And when you read deeper into the study and the data sets, it says, yeah, because at peak times, no more people can access public transport because the trains are full, right? Which is a totally different thing, that not more people would use that, right? It's the availability, because such a big portion of people can only use public transport, and it's not even all of them who should be able to use it. So what's your take on the accessibility of mobility in general?
Yeah, thank you for bringing up this topic and this research, because it's true. There's no such thing as a price sensibility to public transport, but it's the reliability that counts, and also the design of the public transport, and also to really know when and where it is accessible. So I totally agree. We don't have this network, this interconnected mobility system that is based on data, of course, because we are not the best in Germany, I would say, at digitalization. Sorry. Ich sage es nochmal. So we're not the best in Germany, I would say, when it comes to digitalization. And that's a huge problem, actually. So we have to collect more data from our traffic system, from the streets, people moving, pedestrians, but also by bike, of course, to improve the public transport system and also to really guarantee this accessibility for different user profiles, different user groups. Because, of course, we need to solve this last mile issue. If you're in a city like Berlin, it's always about the last kilometer. It's always about the last gap that you can fill. And there are solutions like Yelby. It's an intermodal app which is connected to the public transport. And you can choose different modes to get to your goal or where you have to be. So it's an approach, but we need like a broader approach to maybe on a national level to interconnect cities with each other, even in through Europe, I guess, like having this one app you can really book every trip you want to do, which is also, for private reasons, but also, of course, business-like.
You skipped very gently about a point that I was making when it comes to free public transport, so a very black and white question.
Yeah, I can say something about it. I think with this experiment with the €9 tickets, it showed that there were such a large group that wasn't able in the past to use or to be that flexible, to go on vacation, to make trips to the landside, countryside. So in the social aspect, I would say it's super important to have low budget opportunity for people to travel by public transport. But also, I have to say, it's not the point. A huge group is not sensible to price, but to reliability. So that was the point I made before.
Yeah.
It's the one that really counts. So we have to invest in our rail system and also, of course, in the public transport in each city.
You briefly mentioned, Marta, Europe, and I would like to understand where you see role models in Europe, certain cities or countries that do better or worse than others.
I would say we have to focus on not countries maybe, but cities. I truly believe that we need the local perspective interconnecting with the international perspective. So that means, of course, there are a lot of examples in Europe. Maybe the most exotic one for German people is Pontevedra. It's a city in Spain. For the last 20 years, the city center is free of cars. And there are 3 rules. But first, I have to say there are no traffic lights. There are no road markings and no traffic signs. So the 3 rules are, first, pedestrians, second, cyclists, and third, delivery vehicles. And they have like mobility hubs around the city center where you can park your car and then take a shuttle to the city center. And it works for 20 years. So they're proven right. And it's a great approach. But a whole other thing then, regulating anything or putting signs or banning cars, but also providing a solution how people can still access maybe in a more democratic way or for more people with the shuttles, the city center. So this is one. But also, of course, Paris is doing bold moves since the corona pandemic hit. And there are a lot of examples like Barcelona or Oxford that are very similar in processes in terms of participation. Because in every transformation we face internationally, participation is a huge topic every city faces.
I mean, participation might be one topic. Legislation is another one, right?
Yeah.
I'll take the last example with regards to that topic. 2 examples, actually, that I consider one frustrating, one very amusing. Also, both in Berlin, right? So you're well aware what happened to Friedrichstraße, right? So for our listeners who are not familiar with that, there has been one of the main streets in Berlin who has been locked up for cars now for over a year, I think, and only legible or made as a bike highway. And now, because of the mistake or lack in legislation, this has to be changed. Court ruled that cars have to be allowed on the street again, which is something that really frustrates me. And I read today, which then I considered very amusing, that legislation in Berlin and the Senate, they decided to allow bikes and small electric motor vehicles on paid parking slots on the streets to park there for free, which obviously caused a direct rampage by the automobile or by the automotive industry. but I consider that a little bit of a counter movement. But it shows again how powerful legislation is and how the framework that we're operating on impacts actually what we can change and what not. So as a certain level, if we want to make cities from an urban perspective, from a mobility perspective, more accessible, more inclusive, and more democratic, as you mentioned correctly, these are huge things due to the legacy of legislation that we have to face. So this is something that always kind of like frustrates me when I look at these great small scale projects, but considering then how can we scale them up, right? Because that, I think there are a lot of things that needs to be taken on.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have experienced, especially in Berlin, with the referendum, with the Fahrradentscheid in 2018, grown out of a grassroots movement, a civil activist movement, that it is possible to bring such topics into legislation and also address, like prioritizing bicycle and also pedestrian traffic over the car. And this is something we have in Berlin, but also 50 other cities in Germany are about to, create or working on. So I think it's, of course, key that legislation is focusing such topics, which the society or the urban society is targeting. But also, we have to focus or put priority on international exchange because, as I mentioned before, the short distances, one famous narrative is the 15-minute city. And of course, it includes the strategy of the municipality. Having this narrative, which comes from Paris, from Carlos Moreno, it's about proximities and bundling services in a multi-centered city. So, of course, cities have to work closely with scientists, with universities, with civil society, all together. And also, maybe to make the last or mention another player or actor in the urban context, it's, of course, the real estate sector and employers. So more and more, because I was working as a mobility consultant the last couple of years, the private sector more and more realizes or sees the urgency to bring about change. And that it's not just about a new company car, but also that the issue is playing an increasingly important role in sustainability reports and also the recruitment of the generation that is, about to get into a job. So solutions like the green mobility budget or a climate-friendly micromobility hub also at the office is something that is part of this huge mobility turnaround. It's like an interaction of urban actors. We have to really sit at the same table or bring actors together to avoid rush hours. So we need regulation. And also we need like subtle nudging at the office, for example, to change mobility behavior. It's all about behavior, and every actor in the city influences or causes mobility and can provide solutions for that.
So this was actually the perfect transition to the next topic, because now we want to focus on collaboration and what it needs in cities when different stakeholders get together. Perhaps we start with like how people or startups or whatever should facilitate citizen participation, because this is so important. And if you look at numbers, it actually is quite different how easy it feels for citizens to participate in politics and public projects, at least. So from a local, like half the people say it's easy to participate level, to a national level, only a quarter, to Europe level, and then only 15%. So we would like to get all your wisdom here. What is key of success from your point of view? What are typical stumbling blocks? And how do we push that?
Thank you for raising this question, because it is also part of my next chapter as an entrepreneur. But maybe let me start with Barcelona, not because it's my favorite city, but they have something that I have to share, because the city was often been under pressure in the past as it regularly exceeded the polluted limits of the European Commission. I'm sure you came across the superblock strategy.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, great. So large parts of the city are structured similar to a chessboard with square blocks of houses. So this decision was made to take 9 of those blocks, ban cars, and repurpose the street space. And suddenly, there were huge pots of trees standing in the streets. And the first resonance on this experiment was negative, because the redefinition of the traffic routing, like especially the banishment of cars from the residential areas, and some barriers and potted trees were not enough to win the hearts of the residents for this new urban development strategy. So there was a lack of legitimation because people weren't given the opportunity to understand the reasons and also take part in the development process. So it shows that only months after intensive discussions with the residents that resulted in construction of permanent playgrounds, green spaces, and places for social exchange, brought people actually to use and also to love the newly created space. Today, it's like an extended living room for them. And it's truly magnificent. We visited them, especially Sant Antoni in Barcelona this August, and it is incredibly beautiful because the design is so playful and many cozy corners, and also the temperature was way lower than in other parts of the city. So this example shows that key in this participation process was a combination of regulation and co-creation to set a certain frame to initiate the transformation, like banning cars, and then encourage citizens to actively shape the new public space themselves. Transparency is a super important aspect, also as communication, to keep people informed and involved, so they become valuable consultants for the city. Also, the enterprises, companies that are sitting or located in these super blocks are also part of this. The economy flourished because of banning cars, and that's something people don't expect. So Barcelona now has a super block map. It's a website where you can see ongoing transformation of the city. This brings me maybe to a key learning, which I see among other leading examples I was writing in the book about. Barcelona has the picnic table as a symbol for bringing people together on a regular basis. Because another example is Paris. It's the first major city in the world to have a permanent citizens' council. So it's 100 women and men drawn for this role, and they represent the population of Paris by gender, age, residence, and education. Since November 21, they're working on a climate-friendly urban development plan until 24. And all expenses for working at this council are covered. And in Berlin, on the other hand, we have Stadtgremium Digitales Berlin, which is also intended to reflect diversity of Berlin's population. 70 randomly drawn citizens were to work together with the city administration on the new strategy. And these interim results can be commented online by interested Berliners. So we need both physical and virtual places where citizens can participate. And the data's right. It's way more easier when you can physically meet and be or become an expert. Just because you are a resident of this area, you are an expert because you know all the problems, all the struggles, all the maybe the missing parts for a more livable neighborhood, right?
Really, what sticks to me is the expression of it wasn't enough to win their hearts. Mm-hmm. It's not only rational, but you really have to get them emotionally. And yes, the first feeling that people have when they should change, someone says change, is fear or I don't want to at all. And we had that in several episodes here, talking to an architect, a project developer, a chef. It was like always the same. People have fear when it comes to change. And this is what, for me, is now super important, listening to what you say and what you said at the beginning. Like, it needs time to really take them or make them more fearless.
You said it's important to involve and take time because it's about emotions, of course. The point I have to make is, how do those formats turn out to be successful? Of course, there are many factors, but there is a role that bears the skills we'll need more and more in the future, I believe. The moderators and the mediators, the people in between. Every example shows that there are these people, the ones that translate, that interpretate between disciplines, between sectors, interests, and also languages. And every leader I talked about, what their role was in managing huge transformation projects, was really to mediate between different stakeholders. If it is revitalizing a stream in Tel Aviv, or developing future districts like Schumacher Quartier in Berlin or Seestadt Aspern in Vienna, the mediators keep everything together. Also, there's one actor, it's the municipal operating companies, Betreibergesellschaft in German. Their importance is still underestimated because they manage the new districts. They are a problem solver, a service provider, and mediator. So this role really is key and requires a lot of talent and skills because it is about strategic communication and spontaneous intelligence. You need to elaborate a common understanding, right, among the stakeholders, coming from a narrative, for example, a narrative that, combines a vision and also means a story that connects people, creates meaning, conveys emotions and values, and that is activating, and that you have the same image of the future you would like to, accomplish in this district or neighborhood. So a narrative helps to make complex situations more understandable and to manage and moderate participation processes. You need this understanding and also a little bit of the contexts and the content the stakeholders bring to the table. And that is what I'm focusing with the Young Leaders Academy as the international project I'm building with my team, because this role is really essential to make those participation processes successful.
I would agree with you, generally speaking. But the question to me is, what's the right time? E.g., what is the process, right? So from a technocratic perspective, I would say, okay, let's ban cars. I don't care what people say. We're going to communicate. We ban cars and then we're going to communicate because people will get used to it, right? In inner cities. From what you're describing, right, coming to the same result, the process seems to be way longer, yet more inclusive though. But I would doubt that you can get as much people on board that you need to have like a seamless or smooth process where then when you try to ban cars from inner cities, people will say, oh yeah, right, we worked 8 years towards it. It's a great idea. I would still expect that you have people who say, this is the worst thing that can happen to us. The longer the process, the more ankles, the more touch points to diminish it and to undermine it. So maybe the less effective the output will be.
So it's an important question because it raises attention to what sustainable transformation is about. We need, at the one hand, regulation, and that we can, observe in many transformation processes around the world. Paris is a leading example because they're really about bold moves. The mayor, Hidalgo, is really about to change the whole street space, the whole public space, to repurpose public space and to give people the livable space they need, also in terms of sanitation and pandemic situation, like lockdowns, where people have to be at home, to give them more space in the streets to rest, to play, to work, to meet. And we need those bold moves. So we need decisions from the municipalities. The politics have to regulate certain things, like you say, banning cars from neighborhoods. But then you need at the same time to involve the citizens and co-create. So the circumstances are made by the municipality, and then follows this process you was mentioning, this long-term thing, working on a strategy indeed. So we need both. We need these bold moves to really set a limit, to set a goal, to set a narrative, and then not caring, about elections. That's the point. Really, it is the point, also Germany, to have this attitude as a mayor to do the right thing. And then to involve people to build something they need, because you never can go wrong if you ask people what they need.
Maybe one brief follow-up question. Would you say the acceptance of people's participation, and then we're referring to Berlin, is high? Because I always have this initiative in mind that's called Berlin Autofrei, which means Berlin carless, nonetheless. And they wrote a petition, actually even wrote a law, right, to ban cars, for which they got enough votes to have the Senate vote on this, which then got declined by the Senate, right? So this is basically, it's the Senate ignored the public push within the boundaries that we had here in Berlin, which is something where I think, besides the fact that the election problem, even if you have participation methods, what are they good for if they are ignored?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a huge problem. Of course. So it is super important. It's always about who is in which position, who is in these roles, in these functions, to decide something. But it's a sad example, of course, because in other places, other cities, people are more welcomed to work with the city's administration. And that's maybe something Berlin, as a really big city, has to learn, to be more agile, to be more open to new processes, new participation designs, because other cities that are smaller than Berlin are much quicker.
Do you have an example for that? In Germany?
Yes, in Germany, Aachen, for example, they are really like a pioneer, and they are also banning cars from the city center where the theater is located, or the shopping streets. And they are really a great example also to work with sharing companies for bike sharing or e-scooter sharing, because they together have a cooperation. So the private sector cooperates with the public sector on data, collecting data, monitoring data to improve the security, to improve the traffic, to make the rush hour part of the past, I have to say. And they're really doing a great job. And other cities like Hanover also, they have those Experimentierzonen, so experimental areas with culture, arts, with also discussions in public, and a lot of entertainment also in the summertime, which shows how can a city look like in the future when it's car-free. And it's the only purpose, maybe, but it's the first step to another future. So there are some examples that are much more of a pioneer than Berlin is. Yeah.
Of course there are. And now Hanover, Mark started smiling because he's like from nearby, I would say. I don't even know.
No, I'm from Hanover. It's my hometown.
Yeah. That's why I noticed.
Proud,
It's actually, it's really nice when you've been to the city center close to Marktkirche, one of the few areas that are, I would say, representable, because not fully destroyed after the war. And then you have this like huge areas. It's actually really nice. I was surprised when I saw it the first time. I'm not that often in Hanover anymore, but it's really something. Also received a lot of pushback publicly. It is an interesting development, but what touches me always when I think about Berlin, I think we have one of the most progressive local governments in Berlin, at least by design and on paper. And some examples that we also already discussed are leaning towards that direction already and showing this, right? For example, the parking space situation for bikes now, if that goes through. On the other hand, it's so frustrating that not even, let's say, progressive government in that sense can push such demands from the people through, right? This is what I'm always wrapping my mind around. But it's good to hear from you examples from other cities that are actually showing progress and maybe can lead as an example also to bigger cities or really urban areas or metropole regions like Berlin. So this actually eases my mind a little bit and helps me to get perspective here.
I just want to look at the dark side as well. So I like looking at best practices, but I would love to hear your insights about a situation where a project or collaboration failed or not worked as expected, and where you had an aha moment, a learning you could share now. That would be awesome.
The last years I was working as a mobility consultant. That means that I was developing concepts with real estate developers and architects for ways to bring more sustainability into a district, a new district, or some in the city center, for example. And there were a lot of projects where we were having a lot of workshops and talking about the future of mobility, and people asking us, my team, in 2030, will there be cars in the city center? What do you think? And we were always like, of course not. I mean, you can see it. You know that the autonomous vehicles are not ready to be in our streets. You see that the pressures of climate change are so strong that we have to act immediately. And in the city center, in a location that is 1 kilometer from the main station of a city, like Hamburg, for example, of course, it will be a car-free, because like a super block, very meant to be or has these preconditions to be car-free. And then often we had this excitement about, we're going to do like a leading example in the signature piece for Hamburg and in the Hafen City, for example. It was about trust, of course. We had to make clear how many ambivalences we face as human beings. We all want to, be better or live more healthy. But it's very hard at the same time to make it happen, like with nutrition. It's the same with mobility. And we have all very similar challenges in our life. And being stuck in traffic and staring at devices all day, we share that. And from there, it is important to really involve everyone, and everyone that has expertise, like in these workshops we were having. Everyone was super excited. And then it was, in the end, after delivering a concept from our side for the whole district, really planning each infrastructure, digital parking and charging infrastructure. Somehow, some of the projects turn out to be maybe at the end, we had to cut budgets, and no, we're deciding for a more mainstream or something that we know, and not the pioneer. We have a car-free city or district in 2030 vision thing. Like they somehow lost the courage at some point to not, because they couldn't see or couldn't be sure of the success it would have to do really something different, something that is like a signature project. So this was a struggle, but most of the projects really turned out nice and exactly how we planned. Sometimes it happens that people are not having this courage or feel insecure about really investing in another future that is not based on the behaviors and routines we have today.
Shows to me how important it is when being in that situations to explicitly ask, like, what are obstacles that come up when you're leaving this workshop, and why is it important to still stick to the plan?
So if you have the opportunity to talk really to everyone that is involved in the process and also making decisions, it's the best thing, because sometimes there were people we didn't even see, like it didn't even meet. And they were making the decisions. And if you can talk to them and win their hearts for this new scenario, then it's hard to really, rely on this decision. Yeah.
At the beginning, KJ mentioned, and you yourself described yourself as a political entrepreneur, right?
Mm-hmm.
So considering that politicians are not paying you, can you give us, or maybe they are for your consultancy products, but I think there is a different meaning to that, right?
Yeah.
So could you briefly explain, what do you mean by political entrepreneur? And maybe to a certain extent, how can other entrepreneurs become political? And why should they?
Yeah, sure. Political means with a political agenda, because mobility is and always has been political. It is concern of our society, like I said before in the beginning, because it affects our health, our climate change, social justice or social cohesion. So is urban planning in general. In the end, it's about democratic values and creating livable urban spaces for everyone. So our mission, or my mission, always has been to make the sustainable city of the future desirable and attractive for everyone. It's the same with my new project, the Academy. It is not only about shared narratives, but also about effective strategy work and project work that includes various stakeholders. We were talking about this, and that adds real value to the urban society. So I'm a political entrepreneur because I do feel this need to take part in this transformation. And also, there's so much to do on this planet. It's not only mobility, or, of course, the urban context includes many aspects, but making whole industries sustainable, if it is nutrition or food, if it is fashion, furniture, you name it, not just only talk about what you're going to do or about what others are doing, but do it, be about it actually. In the end, because I was telling you, I was or am working interdisciplinary, the team is super important. Maybe it's the most important thing. I don't know if you share my opinion, because the hard times, also as a political entrepreneur, You could also say like sustainable entrepreneur, but it's like very broad. I have a goal also as a female entrepreneur. Everything I do is political in this role. So the team is super important because the hard times will come for sure, over and over again. And you need that team that sticks together based on the same passion, the same vision, and also values. So I believe it is important to see what has to be done in this world. And there's so many things that has to be improved or to design more sustainably. And that's why. So what drives me personally is to make a difference and to try my best in my modest scope and also grow as a human being with that, to really be as good as I can be. And music, I have to say, and singing is an important part. I had never finished that book I was writing last winter without making music because I need this distraction. It gives me life, gives me energy. So find the thing you're passionate about, I would say, if you ask me what maybe I would say to other entrepreneurs, and always trust your intuition, always.
I have one last question before we come to an end, unfortunately. But now you're one founder founding another thing right now. So looking at the whole ecosystem, the typical startup founding team, would you say most of them are political entrepreneurs or only a minority or no one or everyone or whatever?
I think there are more and more, and that's really cool to see. Also in my generation, I met this year at Urban Future Conference. I was part of a Young Leaders program, 22. And I really got to know my generation with their struggles, with their problems, and they're really very similar. But also the passion we share, connecting on so many levels, professionally and personally, that I'm really glad to see that there are more and more political entrepreneurs that fight for something, that are about to better this world or improve the situation for social milieus, for neighborhoods, for districts, for a community. And they really care about people's lives or quality of life. So I'm glad that there are more and more political entrepreneurs, I would say. But it's also about, and I have this critical view or opinion on the Berlin startup scene, because the business model has to be sustainable too, of course. It's not just, only the product, but if you are not financed or if you have not sustainable funding and you are the experts in it, so I leave that to you. It's not sustainable for me, and it's not, to the extent that we need. There are a lot of startups we had in the last 10 years within the sharing economy, the sharing bicycles or e-scooters that had no sustainable business model, and that, somehow are not anymore on our streets and for reasons. And that's something I have to say that I'm really glad that we are aware of a more sustainable economy than 10 years before. And I hope it's going further with it on more, maybe consistently.
I think this is something very important that you're mentioning here, right? I mean, when we're looking at new deals or at companies and at business models, what always strikes our mind is the question, okay, what kind of society are we going to have in 10, 15 years, right? And what kind of businesses will be grown-ups by this time? And this also interferes with each other. And we have the true belief that sustainability in itself means you have a sustaining business.
Yes.
Right? This is the core. The company still exists. It creates value to its stakeholders, therefore also to society. So you have to build something meaningful, not something meaningless.
The bad VC.
No, but that is the point. And I really like your opinion on that. I think in a certain sense, I can only confirm what you just said, right? More and more entrepreneurs have a political agenda. They are very aware of what is going on and how society is developing and what their role of their company, of themselves, can be in such a society. We really like this approach, and this is something that we focus on, obviously, a lot. But, Marta, Thank you very much for giving us so many insights. I think I could have touched on way more topics with you on a way deeper level, and even try to argue a little bit more with you on some points. Maybe we can do that another time. But for now, I want to say thank you very much. We typically end our episodes with a quick fire round. So here it's all about speed and only one answer. Right. So we have guests that always try to mingle around. They try to think. It's not about thinking. It's about gut feeling. And it's about this or that. Right. So you cannot say both. Right.
Yes.
You cannot say both or neither. Right. That's not okay.
Okay.
So
I think
harder now.
No, it's fine. As an entrepreneur, I'm used to decide on things.
Yeah, this or that. Right. Makes it easy. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Okay. Shall we kick it up, KJ?
Yes.
Urban or rural area?
Urban.
Disruptive or keeping with tradition?
Disruptive.
EV or hydrogen?
EV.
She hates to not being able to say something else. You can see it in her face. Yeah. Bike or public transport?
Bike.
High rise or low rise?
Low rise.
Functional or aesthetic?
Aesthetic.
Environmental or social impact?
Social impact.
Build new or modernize?
Modernize.
Political or entrepreneurial?
Entrepreneurial.
Write or read a book?
Read a book.
Thank you, Marta. I know it was tough, but thank you for keeping your word here. From now on, we will refer to this episode that there was a person like really sticking to it. So there's no excuse for future guests. It was so much fun, and as Mark already mentioned, we could have go on talking for not only minutes but probably hours. I hope we will do so, not only when recording podcasts. We wish you all the best for the exciting new chapter, and thank you for taking time to be here today.
Thank you both for having me. It was really a pleasure, and thank you for this great talk, of course, and for your passion for urban transformation. And I wish you really the best and strength, and for your business. You're doing such an important and relevant job, and you are the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Urban Tech VC, a podcast for urban leaders shaping the cities of tomorrow. If you love our show, do drop us a review, share it with your friends, and follow 2BX on LinkedIn or Instagram. And if you are about to raise a round, drop us a note at LinkedIn or via email at idea@2bx.vc. Let's have a talk and see where we can help. Are you tired of always hearing about Silicon Valley VCs and not knowing what the greats of European VC are thinking? Well, no more. Head on over to eu.vc, the go-to place for everything European VC. You'll find podcasts, events, and expert-curated content from all over the EU VC scene. Well, what are you waiting for? Go to eu.vc.